It's no good though, all over now, all so stupid. Yes, yes, said Nikolka unhappily, and Elena hung her head. Alexei started to get excited, tried to sit up, but a sharp pain pulled him down and he groaned, then said irritably, "Get him out of here. Shall I put the bird in the kitchen? I've covered it with a cloth, and it's not making any noise," Lariusik whispered anxiously to Elena. Elena waved him away. "No, that's not it, don't worry." Nikolka strode purposefully out into the dining room. His hair disheveled, he glanced at the clock face. The hands were pointing to around 10 o'clock. Worried, Anyuta came into the dining room. "How is Alexei Vasilyevich?" she asked. "He's delirious," Nikolka replied with a deep sigh. "Oh my God," whispered Anyuta. "Why doesn't the doctor come?" Nikolka looked at her and went back into the bedroom. He leaned close to Elena's ear and began to whisper urgently. "I don't care what you say, I'm going out for a doctor. It's 10 o'clock. The street is completely quiet." "Let's wait until 10:30, whispered Elena in reply, nodding and twisting a handkerchief in her hands. "It wouldn't be right to call in another doctor." "I know our doctor will come." Soon after 10 o'clock a great, clumsy heavy mortar moved into the crowded little bedroom. Alexei was in despair. How were they all to survive? And now there stood this mortar, filling the room from wall to wall, with one wheel pressing against the bed. Life would be impossible, because one would have to crawl between those thick spokes, then arch one's back and squeeze through the other wheel, carrying all one's luggage which seemed to be hanging from one's left arm. It was pulling one's arm down to the ground, cutting into one's armpit with a rope. No one could move the mortar. The whole apartment was full of them, according to instructions, and Colonel Malyshev and Elena could only stare helplessly through the wheels, unable to do anything to remove the gun or at least to move a sick man into a more tolerable room that wasn't crowded out with mortars. Thanks to that damned heavy, cold piece of ordnance, the whole apartment had turned into a cheap hotel. The doorbell was ringing frequently, ring, and people were coming to call. Colonel Malyshev flitted past, looking awkward, in a hat that was too big for him, wearing gold epaulettes, and carrying a heap of papers. Alexei shouted at him and Malyshev disappeared into the muzzle of the mortar and was replaced by Nikolka, bustling about and behaving with stupid obstinacy. Nikolka gave Alexei something to drink, but it was not a cold spiraling stream of water from a fountain but some disgusting lukewarm liquid that smelled of washing up water. Ugh, horrible, take it away, mumbled Alexei. Startled, Nikolka raised his eyebrows, but persisted obstinately and clumsily. Frequently Elena changed into the black, unfamiliar figure of Lariusik, Sergei's nephew, and then as it turned back into Elena he felt her fingers somewhere near his forehead, which gave him little or no relief. Elena's hands, usually warm and deft, now felt as rough and as clumsy as rakes and did everything to make a peaceful man's life miserable in this damned armorer's yard he was lying in. Surely Elena was not responsible for this pole on which Alexei's wounded body had been laid? Yet now she was sitting on it. What's the matter with her? Sitting on the end of the pole, and her weight was making it start to spin sickeningly round. How can a man live if a round pole is cutting into his body? No, no, they're behaving intolerably. As loudly as he could, though it came out as a mere whisper, Alexei called out. Julia. Julia, however, did not emerge from her old-fashioned room with its portrait of a man in gold epaulettes and the uniform of the 1840s, and she did not hear the sick man's cry. And that poor sick man would have been driven mad by the grey figures which began pacing about the room alongside his brother and sister, had there not also come a stout man in gold-rimmed spectacles, a man of skill and firm confidence. In honor of his appearance an extra light was brought into the bedroom, the light of a flickering wax candle in a heavy, old black candlestick. At one moment the light glimmered on the table, at the next it was moving around Alexei, above it the ugly, distorted shadow of Lariusik, looking like a bat with its wings cut off. The candle bent forward, dripping white wax. The little bedroom reeked with the heavy smells of iodine, surgical spirit and ether. On the table arose a chaos of glittering boxes, spirit lamps reflected in shining nickel plate, and heaps of cotton wool, like snow at Christmas. With his warm hands the stout man gave Alexei a miraculous injection in his good arm, and in a few minutes the grey figures ceased to trouble him. The mortar was pushed out onto the veranda, after which its black muzzle, poking through the draped windows, no longer seemed menacing. He began to breathe more easily, because the huge wheel had been removed and he was no longer obliged to crawl through its spokes. The candle was put out and the angular coal-black shadow of Larian Serzhansky from Zhytomyr disappeared from the wall, whilst Nikolka's face became clearer to see and not so infuriatingly obstinate, perhaps because the hands on his clock, thanks to the hope inspired by the skill of the stout man in gold-rimmed spectacles, had moved apart and did not point so implacably and despairingly towards the point of his sharp chin. The time on Nikolka's face had moved backwards from 6:30 to 5:20, whilst the clock in the dining room, although it did not tell the same time, although it insistently pushed its hands ever forward, was now doing so without any senile croaking and grumbling, but in the good old manner, marking the seconds with a clear, healthy baritone, tonk. And the chimes, coming from the tower of the beautiful toy-like Louis XIV chateau, struck, bomb. Bomb. Midnight, listen, midnight, listen, the chimes gave their warning note, then a sentry's halberd began to strike the silvery hour. The sentries marched back and forth, guarding their tower, for without knowing it, man had made towers, alarm bells and weapons for one purpose only, to guard the peace of his hearth and home. For this he goes to war, which if the truth be known, is the only cause for which anyone ought to fight. Only when Alexei had reached a state of calm and peace did Julia, that selfish, sinful but seductive woman, agree to appear. And she appeared, her black stockinged leg, the top of a black fur-trimmed boot flashed by on the narrow brick staircase, and the hasty sound of her footsteps and the rustle of her dress were accompanied by the gavotte played on tinkling little bells from where Louis XIV basked in a sky-blue garden on the banks of a lake, intoxicated by his glory and by the presence of charming, brightly colored ladies. Hash. At midnight Nikolka undertook a most important and very timely piece of work.